Oh, wow.
Because he just couldn't pronounce Karthikeya. He said it on air like that.
And he couldn't ask.
He didn't prepare. He obviously, nobody cared about preparing on those things, you know.
Well, I mean, who cared really? Because you're talking about a small community, and
and there was no competition.
Right.
I mean, there was no competition on radio. So whatever you did there, who was going to object to that, you know, and so on. No regulator.
There was no regulator.
There was no regulator either. Okay. The government owned all the stations.
Yeah, you know? Well, the equivalent of a regulator now
is ICASA, of course, yes.
Okay. And, you know, I have questions about ICASA also, because it seems as if there is still an unhealthy relationship in the way that people working at the broadcaster migrate towards the regulator and vice versa.
And the other way around, yes. Yeah. Well, I've been out of touch with it for 8 years now after my retirement, but I was very much involved with ICASA as well. You know, my last job my last 13 years at the SABC, I was head of broadcast compliance. You know, I always joke about the SABC. I was there for 35 years, and you can change your whole career path every 5 years and still have the same pension fund.
The same pension.
Because I did so many things. Besides the 10 years at Lotus, I started the educational radio service, or revamped it from what it used to be called school radio. Govind Reddy brought me back from Lotus actually to revamp that, which is another story for another day, I guess. But my last 13 years were head of broadcast compliance. We had a very close relationship with the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, defending all the SABC channels and services when the boys and girls were naughty on air, and also ICASA, you know, and especially during elections. I was very fortunate to work on every election from '94 right up to my retirement, representing the SABC.
That's a whole world of conversation there. You're talking about, you know, '94. I've got to go into that time with you to talk about the excitement, the energy, because even though you never really made a point of being that prominent as a political activist. No. Your focus was always about journalism and balanced reporting.
Sure. I never participated actively in any. I mean, my politics were restricted to supporting people like the Transvaal Union Congress and so on.
Sure.
But never an active member or a card-carrying member of any party or organization, or even participating in rallies or anything.
Right. But the impact of our newly established constitutional democracy from '94 onwards meant something to you as a man and as a journalist.
Absolutely. I think in '94 we had this vision of another 20 years as manager of Radio Lotus, because there was no way to progress beyond that.
Okay,
you know? And '94 came, the entire broadcasting industry changed.
Sure.
I mean, the regulators came about, and obviously privatization happened.
Right.
And all these extra stations came about. We're sitting here because of '94.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we'd never have had a radio station like this.
Sure.
You know, until it was deregulated in '94. So, and the changes that came about after that have been absolutely amazing. I was fortunate to be there at a stage when the SABC took a conscious decision to help community radios come up. And I was tasked with helping them, not technically, but content-wise. Yeah. And so I went to Venda and all those other states that eventually became part of South Africa, and started helping them set up their community stations, some university stations. So again, a fascinating experience.
So what is it about the magic of radio that keeps drawing you back? You've never been able to actually walk away from it entirely. In fact, I don't think you've retired at all, actually.
No, thank you. I don't think you could. I frequently get called to interviews like we're doing now. You know? Next week I have a different one completely on East Wave Radio about the centenary of Muhammad Rafi, which I'm doing a book on. So there's such diversity in radio. There's the factor of time. There's a factor of editing, etc. Radio is so much easier. Radio in a live situation is far better than TV in a live situation. In TV, even in TV recordings, you got to go and edit and re-record and so on. So I would much rather be in a radio interview than a TV interview. Besides, I don't think I ever faced. I'll tell you a story. While I was at the SABC, I was asked one day when we had what was TV. It was TV1 and then TV2, and for some reason it was TV4, but there was never a TV3. You know, and TV4 was started, as you know, for the sort of black community.
Yes.
And I was asked to come and audition when they started continuity presentations on TV. And I happened to be the only Indian around. They were looking for an Indian and a colored face.
Yeah.
So they asked me to audition, and I reluctantly went there, and I still had the letter, which I wish I could still have to show my grandkids, where it says, you passed your audition with flying colors as far as the audio part went.
Yeah.
Very diplomatically telling me I didn't have a face for TV. So
so you passed the audio, but not the visual. I
passed the audio. So I guess that's why my love for radio continues, you know.
But it's, you know, I just think back to all the, let's look at some of those Lotus years, because there's something magical and mystical about Radio Lotus in itself as a feature of Indian people's lives.
Yeah. You know, I was fortunate to have been there for that decade when there were not many options for us.
Yeah.
I mean, the cinema began dying off, becoming shopping malls, you know. Pirate videos were the only other option. Cinemas were not completely open to us at that time either. So there were very few options. So I always tell our teams now that I was very lucky that we had almost an inbuilt support for Radio Lotus. It was a time when the community was very culturally conscious. You know, music was being played by bands around every corner. Yeah. And they were buying
so
up the
many
cassettes.
bands as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sadly, many of them have fallen by the wayside. There are some still doing work, but it isn't. I say the heyday of our Indian culture in this generation was those 10 years when I was there, 85 to 95.
Yeah.
Because then things began changing. The world became more global. We were isolated in a way. I relate the story about Cape Town. When we took Radio Lotus to Cape Town for the first time, I hadn't been to Cape Town for more than a decade. When we got there, the reception we got was like the president of a country had arrived for this community. We were treated like stars. Amita Anand and I were there.
Really?
And later J.J. Mathura and I went there.
Yeah.
We were treated like royalty. And what amazed me, it was like going into another small world where they didn't have access to Radio Lotus.
Yeah.
And it was like rediscovering Muhammad Rafi, which they were diehard fans of. They didn't know the music. Another story is where R.D. Burman arrived for the first music show in South Africa after things had opened up, somewhere in the 90s, early 90s. And he came to me and he wanted to know, he showed me a list of his songs that he wants to feature in the show. And he said, probably these are only the songs that South Africans know of me. And surprisingly, I told him, yes, we all know all these songs, but we also know much more. Yeah. And he changed the playlist for the show after we
Was he quite surprised with how people knew his,
very much
his
so.
music?
Very, very much so. And many other artists who came in the early years would all be surprised that South Africans know their songs. You know?
South African Indian people still are major consumers of audio, visual, and music content from India.
Very much so, although cinema, you know, my friend A.B. Musa of the Avalon Group, he's a distributor of the Indian movies, and he also has his Cine Center cinemas. In fact, he's opening one next Wednesday. I think you're also going to be there.
Are you going to be there?
Yes.
Well, then I know it's an event.
Yeah. Thank you. So, so he's still showing the cinema the movies, but the audiences have declined, although he remains confident that it's going to grow again. After COVID, it almost disappeared after COVID because of COVID, but it's been picking up a bit. Another important factor for the survival of the culture, and especially in the movies and so on, is the expat Indian community which is now settled in South Africa. You know, some say they have a different culture to ours, which might be true in terms of they speak the language which we are busy dying out with us. They come with that culture and they settle here and they want to continue it here. So they even form their cultural associations. I mean, I interact with them regularly because of my work with the Press Trust of India.
So you speak Gujarati?
I speak Gujarati, I speak Urdu, and I speak Hindi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I know 17 words in Tamil.
17 words?
Of which 12 are unmentionable on air, which I've been taught.
Those are always, I even up to now, I maintain that being sworn at in Tamil is one of those life-changing moments.
Yeah. The nice part is that I can swear somebody was a non-Tamil speaker smiling there, and he thanked me for the compliment.
That's a gift.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, that's, I like the fact that you are still engaging in these events. You're still attending the launches, the premieres, and all of that. Do you think it's part of what keeps you young and strong?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a stage where I'd be with some friends sometimes who ask me, how do you manage this? My record is still 11 events in one weekend.
Oh,
from a Friday night to a Sunday evening.
Oh, wow.
11 events.
Yeah.
And the challenge was because there comes a kind of expectation, because I was manager of Radio Lotus, so everyone wants you at the event.
Sure.
So going to one and not going to another would be a challenge. So I developed a way of going to one, explaining to the others, I'm going there as well, and I'm going after you, I'm going there, so I'll pop in for a while, and I had to schedule it appropriately, so that I got to those 11 events where I take a picture or two to cover it, and then some of them have to speak for a few minutes,
there we go,
and then by Sunday night get home and just flop.
If their event starts late, then that's their problem.
Correct. And fortunately, because of that jumping in between, I usually got to any event in the middle of the event, except the first one.
No, sure. But I mean, I've seen you actually do this, because you're quite mercurial. You'll just flit in and you'll press the flesh, shake the hands, have a quick hors d'oeuvre, and then you're gone.
True. What I miss most is those hors d'oeuvres, because by the time I got to some of those functions with the better hors d'oeuvres, they were gone.
Oh, you see, that's because I was there before you.
But also, you see, it gave me an opportunity to learn so much. I learned so much about the different religions, the different cultures, And it's not just the Indian community, because there were others as well, the Greek, the Portuguese, who would want to invite me and so on, And it was a great learning experience.
Did you ever learn how to swim?
You're joking about it. Just yesterday at home, we've had a pool, and my son and my grandkids convinced me to put in a heat pump.
Oh, really?
So they can swim in warm water.
Yeah.
So that's happened for the past fortnight or so. So every night they're in the pool.
Yeah.
And they're trying to drag me in. Now, my wife and I have both never learned to swim. So you're joking about it, and you just brought it up now. So just 2 days ago, we approached the local swimming school. I'm 72, and she won't mind me saying this, she's 66.
Yeah.
And we said we want to learn to swim as pensioners.
Yeah.
So the guy listened on the phone.
Yeah.
And he says, "Excuse me, is this a crank call from one of the radio stations?" And you mentioned a name, somebody's name that I don't know. Some radio station that does these crank callers.
Oh, okay.
I don't know still.
Yeah, there are some that do that.
Like Darren used to do in the early days.
Yeah.
So I said, no, generally I live 3 blocks from you. We can come over and see that. And he really thought this was a crank call.
Yeah.
Eventually, I convinced him that we want to learn, but is it too late to learn to swim?
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's not too late to learn to swim, but you must understand, you're going to be there with these 3 and 5 and 8-year-olds.
Oh, please.
And they're going to call you grandpa and grandma.
But that's wonderful. You love that title.
So I said, that's fine.
Yeah.
I have my own 2 grandkids who are now 20 and 21 years old. So I'll bring them along. They can swim.
There's nothing wrong with that. As you say.
So he said to me, sir, if you have those kids and you can get hold of them, I would strongly recommend, I need your money, you're welcome, but I would strongly recommend that they hold your hands and teach you to swim in your own pool.
That's lovely. Well, we're going to take a quick break now as well. I see I get the okay from KB. So, Fakir, we're just going to take a minute and we'll be back. It's Reality Radio on a Friday night.
You're listening to 919. You're listening to 919.
I've been waiting for you all my life. Hoping for a miracle. I've been waiting day and day.
919. You're listening to 919. Reality radio, as real as it gets. Only on 919.
And we're back. It's Reality Radio on a Friday night on 919 with me, Jack Devnarain, and in our special guest seat tonight, Fakir Hassen, just telling us the incredible stories about his journey as a journalist, as a newsman, a radio guru, and just as one of those iconic figures that's just always reporting on developments in the Indian community. But some huge accolades as well, just to mark your time and the years that you spent, Fakir. The Radio Hall of Fame must be one that's really close to your heart.
Most definitely. Certainly it was quite a surprise to be nominated, and also amongst peers, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely stands out as one of the biggest accolades. And there have been a lot in the Indian community in particular, you know. One of the prize ones is, I'm not Hindi speaking. I'm of Gujarati origin, but the Hindi Shiksha Sangh of South Africa, one of the oldest cultural organizations, they honored me alongside all veterans of the Hindi stalwarts.
Oh, amazing!
You know, and that was like a special accolade. Not being Hindi first, and that was because of my support for them for all these years. Of course, I can speak Hindi, which I learned mainly through Bollywood movies,
really?
You know, which is a passion. Which is a passion I have. So. That was a very prized one. Then there've been, I mean, in one of my books, I was asked to make a little section of the accolades. You know?
Really?
And I very reluctantly did that.
It's good though. I'm glad.
But I decided it needs to be a record of it somewhere. You know, and we did a count. The certificates lying in a cupboard somewhere, and trophies on the top of the cupboards, etc. And we did a count. There were 217 at that stage, and this about 3 years ago. So. But there's some very prized ones among those.
Well, you know, and I know one of the ones that are quite close to your heart as well is the Nelson Mandela Award for community service.
Absolutely. This was given to me by Eastwave Radio that used to do community awards every year to mark Madiba's birthday. And in 1 year, I was given the award in absentia because I was at the launch of a friend's book. At the same time. And I knew I was nominated, but I never expected to get the award. And on Monday, when I wanted to do the story around it, then I tried to get the information. And they said, we have your trophy here. When can you come and collect it? So obviously I thanked them. And what was nice is that it's a community that votes for that award. This was, and it's a prestigious award. So there's an acceptance by the community, or recognition by the community indirectly.
That's important.
Through that station.
So what other community work do you continue to do? What do you think is important for the community?
Well, you know, they're diverse things. I've been writing for 20 years a Muslim a contribution to world Muslim news in the Islamic organization that I work with, Sabri Chisti. That's been going on a long time.
The fair is still happening. They had an annual...
No, they used to have one. It was one of the biggest events. It's been a long time ago, and since then we haven't had that. Then I work with the Congress of Business and Economics for the last few years. Very nice organization which started in the days of the Transvaal Indian Congress. It was a business offshoot. After 94, I think it went into a bit of decline because things had started changing, and then a group got together and they revived it. So for the last few years, we've been making awards every year with a theme. Last year we awarded with all the whistleblowers that are struggling and so on.
Oh, that's fantastic.
This year, just 2 weeks ago, we honored the ICJ team that is representing South Africa at the ICJ. And quite a challenge, as I mentioned, logistics and so on. But it turned out to be a huge event. We had Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman as a keynote speaker.
He's a great speaker.
And absolutely. And the response we got back after the event is that it's been our best yet. It's amazing. A gala dinner and a banquet, and it was a bit of a challenge, I must admit. How do you serve up all this fancy food when you're talking about the people going hungry in Palestine? We debated it at length, and we actually I can share this with you, but it's over now. We usually have a comedian there. we decided against having the comedian.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be appropriate. And the comedian himself, Mervyn Pillay was a comedian assigned to it. And he himself said, I don't think it's going to be appropriate. He said, I need the job, I need the gig, but I don't think it's going to be appropriate for me to be there.
But he is that kind of guy as well.
Yeah, very honest about it as well.
Yeah, if he will honor the spirit of the event, even if it means that he doesn't do the gig.
Sure, absolutely.
You did work with him as well for many years. Yeah?
Well, there's a long story about Mervyn. Mervyn, as a youngster, when I was at Lotus, used to tag along with us, Hussein Vali and I, particularly. We toured almost the entire country with his show. He was at his height of his career. Yeah. And Mervyn would tag along with us. And one day, there was a show, I can't remember which show exactly, at the Durban City Hall. And Mervyn at the back of the stage, behind the scenes, would be doing this mimicry of Amitabh Bachchan and everything that he did so well. Yeah. And I kept telling him, go onto stage. And he acknowledges all the time that really? I pushed him onto the stage, literally. I literally took him, I said, you're going to do this? And he said, no. And I pushed him and I said, go and say this there, what you've been telling us backstage. And he tried a bit and he was such a roaring success.
Really?
Never looked back
since
then.
That was the big moment.
And every time he sees me in the audience when he's performing, he acknowledges his
because that's been, it's still one of his big acts even now.
Absolutely. He's advanced since then. He's done a lot of other things as well, but he's still very good at it.
But you've launched some major talent as well. Over the years, you've guided and mentored people in the world of radio, and you've turned out some massive personalities.
Well, I don't know if I turned them out. I was fortunate enough to create that first opportunity, and there are a few people I'm very proud of. Devi Sankari Govindar, who also always, if she sees me there, she'll stop her speech and start thanking me, which I've actually told her recently, you must stop doing that, it's becoming embarrassing. Yusuf Abramji also does the same, always acknowledging that. Some of the big personalities, Vikash Mathura, you know very well.
And Vikash and Ray were on our show some months back.
Right, They did a show last week at Gold Reef City. I couldn't go, unfortunately, but trying to revive the memories. There are lots of them, particularly proud of them. Vimla Frank, who was my secretary for South Africa for a short while, of course. Yeah. And since then, I look at TV these days, and almost every second sports presenter is a female now. You know? So, she's of course moved on to much bigger things as well. I always tell them, what makes me really proud is if somebody calls me a mentor, and especially if they're in a position that is where they've risen above any position I've ever held.
Yes.
That is extra special to me.
I know what that feels like because...
you're in the same boat, I think.
It came up quite recently, in fact, where, for a long time, powerlifting is very much a part of my life. And, I've dedicated my life to it. My father taught me how to lift. And now both my kids are lifting competitively. And they're doing really well as well. And for the very first time, we had an opportunity to compete. It was a small club event, so it was quite informal, but for me to be competing on the same platform with my son and my daughter, and my son, who is now 26 years old, for the first time, posted a better total than I did.
Yes.
So everybody's having a go at me now. They're saying, your son beat you.
But doesn't that make you extra proud?
Well, that's what I'm trying to explain to them. It's like, guys, you don't understand what a victory this is for me.
Absolutely.
When your children exceed your
rise above
best,
you, sure.
That is when you know you've succeeded.
Yeah.
That is when you can call yourself, okay, I know I've done okay as a parent.
Absolutely. And I feel the same about people who say I've been a mentor to them. I say, where you've gone, I haven't been. And if I played a small part in you getting there, then I feel very happy about it.
But I don't want to make light of this moment. It's a big deal for me to be in a radio studio with you. Because you know my journey. My journey was on film and TV.
Yes.
And I've never really ventured into radio up until, when we started the show in March this year. So what I wanted to ask you is, when you come across young talent and you see this person has a passion and they know their music and they're into sports, they communicate well one-to-one, but they also communicate well through the microphone. What are some of the areas that you need to coach them on typically?
Well, I want to go back to when I was at Lotus. And Amita Anand, who was also a retired announcer from there, he tells me a few years ago that, I always remember what you told us. Prepare for a life beyond announcer. because you are not going to be an announcer forever.
Right.
Somebody else is going to come along and they're going to take your job,
absolutely.
and you need something else to fall back on.
Yeah.
And if you're into media, look at alternatives in the media. There are so many alternatives coming up.
Yeah.
So
Don't
don't be
be stuck.
stuck, and I don't advise only on radio. Certainly my first passion, first love is radio, but do other things. The journalist, for example, I'm getting a bit long in the tooth. So, running around to those 11 functions a weekend, I've been trying to mentor younger people to take over that job, basically.
Yeah.
But I find it a very difficult task, because those who come along see it as a glamour job. They say, there's going to be
tell them about it.
Beyonce is coming and we're going to get a pass to go to Beyonce's show. Yeah. Then there's a queue waiting to assist me or to shadow me. But tell them to go into a temple or a religious function,
Yeah.
Oh, my mom says I can't go into a temple, for example,
Sure.
And so it becomes a challenge, because if you want to be I like to believe I'm a community journalist.
Yes, that's
where I
exactly.
started.
And you positioned yourself.
Yes, yeah. And that's what I'd like to train young people on. But if you want to be a community journalist, you need to be able to find out, why my dustbin not collected today?
Sure.
Why is the Palestine problem going on? You've got to do such diverse things. And I never had any formal journalistic training, besides studying communication for my first degree, which was totally different. We were the guinea pig class at that time at Judisa.
Yeah.
But the formal on-the-job training is nothing that can prepare you for anything else. That's the only way to get prepared. Do everything. Used to cover local sport, education.
Do the dog
yeah,
work.
Absolutely. And I'm very, very, very proud and pleased that that's where my grounding was.
Do you think young radio people, some journalists, and I include actors and things as well, do you think people are, or do they have a good grasp of what it means to be a freelancer in the industry? Because that always takes people by surprise when we tell them what it means to be a freelancer.
It does, and I've had a few people ask me that, where they get offered freelance contracts and so on. There are two sides of it. The older people would prefer a permanent job,
Sure.
while the younger people tend to look for freelance work.
Yeah.
For the variety it offers, for the ability to move around freely and so on.
Yeah.
I myself am a freelancer now, basically, for
Yeah.
some local media and international media writing. Also, it gives you the freedom of not having a boss telling you where to go.
I cannot imagine you having a boss for any reason whatsoever.
Well, not
except
now.
Devnarain. Speaking of, I wanted to ask you,
Yes.
this is just to wrap up. Do you cook?
Not at all.
Yeah?
Not I'd like to offer all my books. I've got 35 now that we've done in partnership with the Apple group of print companies, my dear friend Semi Naidu and his son Shumal. And all these are available. Some of them out of print, of course, but they're available as PDFs. And they are available free. We put them into libraries and schools and universities, even free of charge, with sponsorship.
Amazing.
That's how we've always worked. And they are available to anyone who wants them. Just drop me a WhatsApp or an email and we drop it to you immediately.
So people can get a hold of you on social media. You're on Facebook, you're on Instagram.
I'm on Facebook, not Instagram. I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
Yes. But you can reach me on Facebook, on WhatsApp. And I'm very happy to give my number out.
I have access to your books as well, which, as you say, is the repository of your life's collection of archived material over the years.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's just going to be wonderful to share.
Time runs out. When I open my mouth, it never closes until you interrupt me. But I hope it's been interesting to the listeners as well.
I love the stories that you have. In fact, I'm quite convinced that we are not done.
Sure.
We have to have a follow-up at some point. So I wanted to thank you, Fakir. It's been amazing having this hour with you.
Thank you, Jack.
It's and of course I'm going to connect with you because I'll see you next week for the screening.
Yes.
And let's make more stories together. And to everybody, thanks for joining the show. You have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday. It is Reality Radio with me, Jack Devnarain, on 919.
Welcome to 919.
You got that good energy.